Welcome. We are super glad you joined us. We are the Southeastern Swamp Stewards, and we are a local chapter of the North Carolina Wildlife Federation here in Southeastern North Carolina. So in a tiny little town called Whiteville. We apologize for our technology delay. We're in Whiteville and trying to use the internet. So you can see that we added ourselves as a local chapter this year, starting January 24, and we're focusing on the swamp and therefore named ourselves the Southeastern Swamp Stewards. This is our page that our mission is going on, which we're currently working on. We have lots of great ideas, including protecting wildlife, protecting nature, all of those awesome things which we do and want to do. And then we have some upcoming events that we would love for you to join us. One of those in person is here at the museum, and that is game night. And then we are also partnering with the Great Kohari River Tour in Clinton, which is coming. We would love for you to join, and you can find all that information on the NCWF page to register and get more information. Tonight you are here to hear the story of the hummingbird, or how this tiny little hummingbird, I'm sitting on the floor, it's weird, has inspired an amazing human to go forth and make the world a better place. So we hope you enjoy. Our internet connection is unstable. We hope you can hang tight. And I'm going to escape these slides, stop sharing. And MJ, go ahead and share. And we will get started here.
Also, if you have any questions, feel free to throw them in the chat or the Q&A, and we will answer all questions at the end.
Thank you. Yeah. Oh, so sorry, I'm on the floor. Not that young anymore. We were doing a webinar as well, so people that can't make it in person can join us on Zoom. So that's why I was sitting there doing that. But I do want to welcome you. Pretend this says Swamp Stewards. And pretend, here, this is it right here. So the North Carolina Wildlife Federation, which many of you know, has been serving our community in North Carolina since 1945. Their mission is protecting wildlife through conservation, education, all of those beautiful things. When I moved here 4 years ago, I was interested in joining a chapter, and there was none anywhere near us. So then it was, let's just start our own chapter. So a group of us got together. We are the Southeastern Swamp Stewards. And as the Southeastern Swamp Stewards, our mission is to help people experience the swamp in a way that is loving and caring and authentic and beautiful, because as you all know, we preach to the choir here. The swamp is vital to our lives and our existence here. Tonight's speaker is visiting me from the Dominican Republic, and I said, "Oh, you're coming? Great, you're going to give a talk." So we are really glad you came to listen. Maria Jose Fernandez is, always will be, one of my students. I taught high school in the Dominican Republic for 2 years, high school science. Her school, she got a U.S. diploma. So all instruction was in English. Thank goodness, because I couldn't teach science and Spanish. And I met Maria Jose when she was in 11th grade. And we didn't immediately fall in love. No, it took a while. And then we joked that she's like the older sister because she's way more mature than me. She didn't have it together.
She also has a younger sister.
Yes.
Also, so the younger sister is the oldest. I'm the middle, and you're the youngest.
Yeah. So that's kind of how we've gone, and we've gone on lots of adventures together. She has become a teacher. She went to NYU. She studies history, and then she has dedicated her life to outdoor education. So she's going to share with you part of that story, as well as this idea of what's the one drop at a time mean? Yeah.
Hey, can you tell me if I'm actually on the screen? Because now I can't actually
Yes.
see the screen. Okay, cool. Perfect. So hi, yes, I'm Maria Jose Fernandez, but you can call me MJ. It's a little bit shorter, has less R's. And so I am gonna tell you the story of the hummingbird first, and then we'll go through a little bit of my life that I think that way we can see how this story has affected me in so many ways. If you look at any of my jewelry, I have hummingbirds all over the place. Anytime anybody sees anything with a hummingbird on it, they'll bring it to me from wherever they are. And so this is something that is really important to me and is really central to who I am and is really one of the guiding principles in my life. And so this morning we got to do a little story time with the little ones. But this time I'll just tell you the story. I'd like to acknowledge that this story we learned from an incredible lady called Wangari Maathai, Nobel Peace Prize winner. And she learned from the indigenous people of Latin America and the South Pacific. So there was once a little teeny tiny hummingbird, and he lived in a big forest. And one day a big fire came and the whole forest took flame. And everything was burning down. All the animals run out of the forest. And they're just standing at the edge of the forest, kind of like seeing it happen. Big animals like the elephant and the bear and the tiger. They're all looking and being like, oh, it's too hot, or I'm scared. While in the meantime, the hummingbird, without saying anything to anyone, she's not making a big fuss. So she just flies over to the stream and grabs one little drop of water and flies back to the fire and drops it on the fire, back to the stream and back to the fire and back to the stream. And eventually, one of the bigger animals that could probably carry more water than a hummingbird stops her and says, "Little hummingbird, what are you doing? You're too little. Your beak is too small." And without missing a beat, she just says, "I'm doing the best I can," and keeps going back and forth and back and forth. And so I have learned over time that really what the world needs is not for us to be perfect, but for us to do the best we can everywhere we go. And so if you just approach it like that, sometimes things that are scary or too big or seem like a really big jump in life are easier because you just have to do the best you can. It doesn't have to be perfect. And so that's how we end up with a lot of the stuff that I'm going to talk about right now, which in many ways is scary and big and impressive. But I think it's important. We often look at speakers who have done big mountains or have gone on big adventures and we think like, wow, I could never do that. That takes like a really brave person who can do really big things in order to be able to do that. But really, most of us are just doing things one step at a time or one drop at a time. And so this is kind of what the inside of my brain looks like. And this is kind of what the whole presentation looks like. But I'll go through all the little things and everything. This is my dog. So just a quick background before we go into anything. As Emma said, I graduated from New York University with a bachelor's degree in secondary education and history, specializing in Latin American and Caribbean studies specifically. I got my master's degree from Harvard in diversity, equity, and inclusion for outdoor education. Did that during COVID, so I was fully on my computer the whole time. I have over 7 years of experience in outdoor education in a variety of places all over the world, Latin America, the South Pacific, the Caribbean, the US, kind of all over the place. But some of the big companies I've worked with are the High Mountain Institute, which I'll go into a little bit later, Sea Semester, Broad Reach, and finally, this last little one is called Hummingbird Adventures. And it's the programs that I founded and was the director of for the last 3 years. And we'll go into why I was the director of later. So, some pictures of me being me. But we can go into the next. So where does this all start? And I'm gonna stand further back, but I'm not gonna be able to read. You're gonna see. This all starts in Dominican Republic. So again, I'm from Dominican Republic, born and raised. My first language is Spanish. The Dominican Republic is this tiny little island right here. So this is Florida, Cuba, right? We share the island with Haiti. And that helps you kind of figure out where you are. And so I went to a school that was in English, pre-K through 12, American curriculum, high school, but in the Dominican Republic. And so it was really cool because we got these really incredible opportunities that would really not be available to us in many other schools around the country. One of those opportunities was being taught by Lisa Yana. And so really a lot of this wildness that you will see in the next few slides starts after I meet her. So some of the big things on here are lionfish. Lionfish were a huge part of my high school career. We started a program called Sea Savers. There's a big organization and conference that is global called the Global Issues Network, based on a really cool book by Jean-Jacques Richard called 20 Issues in 20 Years. The point of the book is like 20 issues that must be fixed in the next 20 years in order for us to be able to kind of combat a lot of the global problems that we're seeing. That book was written, I think, 30 years ago. All 20 issues are actually doing worse, which is really encouraging. But 10 years into the book being written, they actually had this big conference of all adults and big scientists and really important people. And they realized that nobody was really doing anything. Like a lot of people were talking theoretically about a lot of things, but nobody was actually actioning it. And so this group of people were like, well, what if we give it to kids and see what happens? So they started the Global Issues Network. They gave it to kids and some incredible projects came out. Kids don't do theoretical. We do action, we do movement, we do the thing. And so they've now been organizing these massive international conferences all over the world for years. And we got to go to two of them, one in Sao Paulo, Brazil, and one in Costa Rica. And we went to present this lionfish project. The lionfish project was incredible. It was a 3-tier project that focused on education, by educating not only the students, all the 1,500 students at the school, all got to see and learn about the lionfish. We worked with restaurants in order to educate the public on that you can eat. Lionfish, we worked with the fishermen to teach them how to fish it. We then also created basically a supply and demand chain, right? We taught the restaurants about the benefits of eating lionfish, which then made the fishermen want to fish more lionfish because the restaurants were asking for lionfish. We organized the first lionfish derby in the Dominican Republic. It was a massive event where people were coming from all over the country to fish lionfish. We had a ton of sponsors. We had different chefs from different restaurants come in to cook the lionfish that was caught during the derby. We were in the newspaper, we were in the news, we were all over the place. And again, this sounds really cool, but you have to think that really this was Yema standing in a classroom with like 9 of us being like, what are we gonna do? What are y'all gonna do? Because I'm not doing anything because this is a you project. And so this was our little group. And it was literally just a group of high schoolers who believed they could and were told that they could and were encouraged to do better and do more and dream big. And then we show up to Sao Paulo, Brazil. It's our first time ever. So our school had never gone to GIN. We show up to Sao Paulo. We're like, this project is not perfect. Like people are gonna think that like we haven't done a great job, blah, blah, blah. We did fantastic. Every single keynote speaker in the conference came to look at us. It was like one of the most exciting things. It was like so cool. I think it was the first time that I got to work on something from beginning to end. From the research of reading 20 issues in 20 years to the trips we took to try to figure out what our issues were going to be, to like actually presenting it. And it was so incredible because you think of these big organizations, but they all start like this. They all start little and you just kind of have to do it and figure it out as you go. So it was really cool. Yeah.
Can you explain why lionfish are an issue?
Yes, so lionfish are an invasive species to the Caribbean. They reproduce very effectively. They are very good at creating more lionfish. They also have no natural predators in the Caribbean or really this ocean. So in the whole Atlantic, they don't have any predators because they are South Pacific fish. And so without any predators and being real good at making more lionfish, we have a massive surplus of them. Lionfish are also carnivorous fish, therefore they eat other fish. And so they are eating our already low populations of native coral fish, which is having a huge effect in the Caribbean. More and more, this issue is getting more under control with a ton of different projects. We were able to actually, like, specifically in the national park that we were working in, reduce that population very significantly. And in a ton of different places around the Caribbean, they're doing different things. Belize was training sharks to eat lionfish. Like showing the sharks that they could eat lionfish so that the sharks would start eating them. So yeah, still a big problem. It is now more of a pocket problem in certain areas as opposed to the blanket problem that it used to be probably like 10 years ago.
In some areas, we're actually putting a bounty on lionfish.
Yeah.
I used to dive Cayman,
Mhm.
and I think that they had a bounty
Yeah,
on
Jamaica
lionfish.
is doing that too.
But you had to be careful how to catch them because they're dangerous to catch if you don't know what you're doing.
Exactly. So that was part of our work, was like teaching fishermen how to catch them.
I'm talking about divers.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah. So lionfish, huge. And then we got to go to Costa Rica. We worked with sea turtles there. We were helping collect the eggs. That was a wild adventure. Where we were walking on beaches in the middle of the night where armed poachers were trying to get the eggs. But the scientists that we were working with, again, I am in high school. The scientists that we were working with, had made an agreement with the Poacher Coalition. I don't know. And they had agreed, okay, if the poacher, whoever gets the turtle first gets the turtle, which means if the poachers get there first, they get the eggs. We can't do anything about it. If we get there first, the poachers won't come to get the eggs. But because of how they had handled the relationships with the poachers, they were actually able to do the measurements and stuff on the turtle. Even though we couldn't get the eggs, we could get a count of how many eggs were being laid. We could see what time the turtle was coming in. We could measure the turtle, which, like, obviously it would have been ideal to be able to get the eggs, but it was also a really interesting look into like the real politics of science, right? It's very easy to be like, rah, rah, nobody should eat turtle eggs. But in reality, being able to be flexible in some of those things is what allows you to like create true change in some of those spaces. So we did that, but during Sao Paulo, so when we go to Brazil to present, we see this really cool presentation on upcycling. So on creating new things from, so without melting down, right? Recycling breaks down the product to create something else. Upcycling does not break down the product. It just changes it into something else, right? So think if you take a car tire and fill it with soil and make a pot, that would be upcycling a car tire. They were talking about upcycling and they were showing these pictures of this really cool fashion show where every dress was upcycled. And so I was graduating that year and I just looked at Yem and I was like, oh my God, my prom dress should totally be made out of water bottle labels. She was like, yes. So in the school that we went to, they had just spent a ton of money taking out all of the water fountains and putting new water fountains and new piping in and all the things so that we could use reusable water bottles. However, the school was still selling plastic water bottles. So we had just put in a whole new filtering system, like the water had been, it was like the cleanest version of any water in the city. And they were still selling water bottles. So this dress, which actually made it into the newspaper, is my prom dress. And is made entirely out of Dasani. I don't know if you have Dasani water here, but Dasani water bottle labels that have been folded in different ways to make the fabric that makes those stripes. So we do all these things. I am hiking mountains. Dominican Republic has the tallest mountain in the Caribbean and actually in the east coast of the United States. Which is pretty cool. And this is me and Yema at the top of the mountain. So I'm getting into that. I'm volunteering with some organizations that are taking kids up to the mountain, and this like love for the mountains is starting to brew, but also like this love for the ocean that I have always had, and this connection to the islands, and kind of like figuring out where we go in between these things. And then I would like to point out this picture, which is me. I should have put the other one, but that is me strapped on to a wall that is probably taller than the museum. We were on a camping trip again with Yema. And we were on this camping trip and we were going rock climbing. And I don't know if any of you have seen rock climbing or pictures of rock climbing. They're really bad if you take them from below. They're not really good pictures. Because you just get like the bottom of people's feet and like really weird positions. And so I was like, can't we take like the pictures from like the side? And one of the rock climbing instructors like, I mean, yeah, you can hike up there and then tie yourself to the wall and you'll get great pictures. And I was like, awesome, let's do it. And he was like, okay. So this is me tied up to this wall. There was a step about this big that I could stand on. And I did get some fantastic pictures of rock climbing that day. But that leads us to our next slide. Yes. The levels of stubbornness. Stubbornness is often talked about as a negative trait. I like to think that sometimes it is positive. Because sometimes it is that stubbornness that makes you want to keep doing something even though you failed at it over and over and over again. And so we say that there's 3 levels of stubbornness. There's stubborn level 1, which is like very basic stubborn, like you're stubborn about some things. You don't really care, but like you want to prove a point sometimes. There's stubborn level 2, which is like you really want to prove a point. Like you are the person who's like Googling something in the middle of a conversation to like prove that like what you were saying was right. Stubborn level 3 is like you are willing to put yourself in like perilous situations that like are not like gonna be the end of you, but like might be questionable at times, in order to like figure out how to do the thing, right? Figure out how to take a good rock climbing picture. You have to do something that is scary and big, and that you're doing safely, but you're gonna do it even if you're scared. So then I graduate, I go to college, and I decide that my summers should be for adventure. And so I was going to school in New York City. All the trees in New York City have been put together in one park. It is not the most outdoorsy place of all time. And I was definitely an outdoorsy person. I loved my time in New York. I loved the university. I loved my professors, but I definitely came out every summer craving to be outside. And so I am not the only stubborn one in my family. I was birthed by this stubborn man and have a very stubborn little brother. And so at some point we were like, why don't we do Kilimanjaro? I had a good friend he's the first Dominican to climb Mount Everest. He's telling us all these stories. I'm working with him, taking kids to the mountains in DR. And I was like, wow, like, wouldn't that be so cool? And my dad was like, that totally would be so cool. Let's do it. So my first summer in college, my little brother, my dad, and I head out to Tanzania and decided to climb Mount Kilimanjaro. My brother is the youngest Dominican to ever climb Mount Kilimanjaro, and I am the first Dominican woman to ever climb Mount Kilimanjaro. So that's pretty fun. But we learned a lot here. This is the first, I had done mountains, but I had never done truly big mountains. And in Tanzania, they say when you're climbing in Swahili, they say pole pole, which means slowly, slowly. Like we're not running up this mountain. Pole pole, we're going slowly, one step at a time. I had always gone hiking with my dad. I had summited Pico Duarte, that mountain in DR, over 12 times at this point. I had never been on the mountain without my dad. And my dad has one lung, so he only has one lung since he was a kid. Is an ultra athlete, does mountaineering and does mountain biking and all sorts of things, so we thought he would be okay. He was not. He, at this point, this is Camp 4. His blood oxygenation level was dangerously low. He had to turn around. And that would be the first time I wasn't on the mountain with my dad. Not only that, my brother at the time was actually 16 years old. So he legally couldn't stay on the mountain without a guardian. That meant that 18-year-old MJ suddenly became the guardian of her brother while we climbed the tallest mountain in Africa. It was incredible. We'll forever be grateful for that. We'll forever be grateful for my dad for taking us and doing that with us. And we'll never forget, like, we don't do things quickly. We do them slowly. We do it one step at a time. It just needs to happen. It just doesn't have to happen in this very second, which is not my nature. I naturally want everything to happen in this very second. And so one of the great lessons that the mountains have taught me is like, take a breath and just. Then we also got to go on safari and see really cute animals. So these are all pictures that I have taken. Best, I also found a lot of pictures of African birds, if you're interested in African things. The North Carolina ones. But yeah, so this was Kili. And the next summer, I'm like, okay, we're adventuring again. What are we doing? And I call Yema, because why not? And we decide to do the Camino de Santiago. The Camino de Santiago is a really long walk across Spain. There's a number of different routes, but we did what is called the primitive route. It was the first route that was ever taken on a pilgrimage. So the original route, or the French way, which is the most popular one, is the actual way that Charlemagne, who's the person who established the walk, took. The primitive walk is the first time that somebody actually does a pilgrimage. So French way is following the original walk to the site. The pilgrimage starts in the primitive way. My family is also from northern Spain where this happens, and so I wanted to do that particular route. Unbeknownst to us, because of course we didn't plan ahead and prepare, it was also the most mountainous route of all, and many people speak of it as the hardest one of all. It was a wild adventure. It was like 13 days. Yema had all sorts of medical issues, wild allergic reaction, sudden onset shin splint. It was incredible. We are wearing these backpacks. We're wearing massive backpacks. Neither of us expected it to be so heavy. I have a great picture of Yema just pulling things out of her backpack in a bus stop and leaving like a donation sign on top of it, just leaving it there. Books were second category citizens, like she did not need books anymore. We also learned as we were walking that it was actually the hottest summer in 37 years, the summer that we decided to do this. So we learned that planning ahead and preparing is probably a good idea. But more importantly, this concept of buen camino is very popular when you do the Camino de Santiago. anytime anybody see these, seashells are the identifiers for the pilgrims. And anytime anybody walked by you and saw you walking or saw your seashell would say like, buen camino, which translates to good way, just have a good way. And it was so lovely because not only were the pilgrims saying, right, other people who were walking by you saying buen camino, but all of these towns were like actively supporting you. They would always say buen camino anytime anybody saw you. And it's just so, it's one of the first times I was doing an adventure, a big thing in the middle of civilization, right? Usually when you're doing big mountains, you're out alone. We were walking through people who were just going to their job, wearing their suits, and they were like, buen camino. And so it's like, it was such a lovely reminder that we do these things alone, right? When you're hiking, when you're sailing, they're very lonesome kind of activities, even when you're with other people, because you're in your head a lot of the time. But it was a lovely reminder of like, others are supporting you along the way and others are always cheering you on, whether you can see them or not. In Santiago, it's just very visible. This trip I also did as a fundraiser. So I raised almost $2,000 for a MS, for the multiple sclerosis, like the big nonprofit in DR, which helped fund the testing, which is really expensive in the DR, for 9 MS patients, which was really cool. But that was really cool. And that was also just like a reminder of people, like people were following us on Instagram and seeing what was going on and donating. We donated like $1 for every step. So it was really cool. But that's like coming. Yeah. So then I graduate college. So I taught for all 4 years of school. So when I was in college, I was teaching all 4 years. My last year I was teaching full time, and I was teaching at a high school in New York, and I had an office, and my kids would walk into my office all the time. Probably to do homework that they should have already done, but also to just like hang out and avoid going places. But one kid walks in one day talking to his friend, and he's like, oh my God, I can't believe blah, blah, blah hasn't even started school yet. Like, they're like hiking in some mountain somewhere. I'm like, what? It's like, yeah, this school that he's going to, he's doing a semester there. Like, they just go like hiking for 20 days. And I'm like, what school? And she's like, I don't know, some school. And I'm like, no. Go back outside, figure out exactly what the name of this institution is, and come back and tell me. And so that institution was the High Mountain Institute. Kind of a wild place. They were the first to introduce me to this concept of semester schools. So it's just kind of similar to like, maybe a lot of us are familiar with study abroad, right? You go to college and you go to spend a semester in Florence or in another state or something like that. Semester schools are kind of like study abroad programs, but for high schools. So all of my students were 11th graders, and they came and spent one whole semester of their 11th grade year with us. Out of that entire semester that they spent with us up in Colorado, 40 of those days were backpacking. So we did 2 20-day backpacking trips where we're fully living out of our backpacks. And so it was really interesting because this was also the first time that I was like truly introduced to outdoor education. We had done it in DR, right? When we did the turtles and when we did lionfish, and all of that is outdoor education, but it had never been labeled for me. And these were the first people who did that for me. And it was incredible because this was my classroom. This was my classroom. This was my classroom. And so when you realize that learning does not inherently happen inside educational institutions, or really I should say inside educational buildings, you realize that learning happens everywhere and that it should happen everywhere. And that what we should strive to teach our kids is to always be learning, regardless of where you are, right? We as adults, whether we acknowledge it or not, are learning things every single day, whether it is by looking at TV or reading or coming to the museum, we're constantly learning things, and to create a thirst for that in children is incredible, because like the best gift we can give them, because they're always going to be trying to learn more things and trying to find more information and go places to learn more things. And so that's what we did with these kids. Outside of the 40 days that we were out backpacking, we also had classroom time. But because it's such a huge proportion of a semester, 40 days is such a huge part of a semester. A lot of their schooling was actually done out backpacking.
So you left New York and went to teach here.
Mhm.
Oh,
Yeah, so I left New York. The apartment complex that I lived in, just the apartment complex, had 15,000 people living in it. And then I moved into Leadville, Colorado, is what the tallest incorporated town in America. Where there were 1,500 people in the county. So it's like it was a big change, and I actually loved this. This was my favorite. But so my first semester here, I was an apprentice, so I was a history apprentice to the head history teacher there. Jacob Willard, shout out. But then, and I think that's part of what are the lessons in both this and the next program that I work for. It's like, if you do things well, like they'll call you back. If you do things well, even in a position like an apprenticeship, where I was really like bottom of the totem pole of responsibilities, you get to see more and do more. Even if what feels like little tiny tasks are what you're given, the more you do, the more you get to do. And so it was really awesome, because then that summer, so I left and went to a different program, which I'll talk about in a second. And that summer I got to come back as the director of their summer program. Which was super cool. And we got to fully redesign that program, which was wild. And then I was now leading these backpacking expeditions. But here I learned, which I think it goes to the next, about types of fun. Another great life lesson. So there are 4 types of fun. This is crucial in outdoor education, because there are moments in life where you really need to convince yourself that something is fun. So I missed 2 of my labels, but it says yes and no, and yes and no. Okay. So type 1 fun is fun now, and it's fun later. Like if you're doing it right now, it's really fun. And if you think about it later, you're going to be like, wow, that was like so much fun. That was the funnest. It was so nice. Type 2 fun is fun later, is not fun now. Right? So like, think of like, I went on this crazy hike, and it was super difficult, and it was raining, and you're miserable, and you're like, I do not like this. But then you think back on it and you're like, wow, wasn't that like the best memories of your life? It was life-changing. But really, you look at pictures of you just drenched in it. So type 2 fun, very common in outdoor education. A lot of moments where you're like, this is type 2 fun, this is type 2 fun, this is type 2. Then we have type 3 fun, which is fun now, but is not fun later. Think that you are lactose intolerant and you're eating some ice cream and you're like, wow, this is delicious and amazing. But later you're gonna be like, wow, my tummy hurts. Definitely shouldn't have had that ice cream. So fun now, not fun later. For fun, we try to avoid. It's what is not fun now or later. It's just not fun, but we call it fun. Because then it's fun. And you can, convince yourself of that. So types of fun was given to me by HMI. And you can go to the next one. Did I skip? Sorry.
Let me see something. No, I did skip. Let's see, entirely.
I lost some of my slides before this, so I'll just talk about SEA for a second. So after HMI, it's also one of the biggest part. It's 3 years of my life that I just skipped. But SEA, or C Education Association, is and now I wish I had a picture of her.
Maybe we can put one up after.
Yeah, I'll show you a picture of it later. Ooh, can you go to the opening slide?
Framers the ship.
Yeah, so Sea Education Association is a study abroad program. So this boat is a boat I used to work on. So SEA is a study abroad program, so college students get to come and spend a semester with us. We do 6 weeks on land and then 6 weeks at sea on this big boat. So this is an 134-foot brigantine, which just means a real big sailboat. We have 3 toilets and 34 people. So sometimes it's like too long. But overall, SCA is an incredible program and organization. And what I got to do there was that I got to sail all over the Caribbean, teaching students Caribbean history. So my first semester, similar to SEA, right? I come in bottom of the totem pole. I was what on ships we call a deckhand. So I was kind of the person that you send to do whatever needs done. I additionally that year was also a teaching fellow, which also means the person you send to do whatever needs getting done, but in a classroom. And so I did 6 weeks on land with the students and then 6 weeks at sea. And I had actually done this program when I was in college. I had done a shortened version of it. And so I got called by my scientist on my student program. It was like, we're going to the DR, want to come? And I was like, yes. So I got on the ship that first spring, on a program called CCC, which was Colonization to Conservation of the Caribbean. And got to sail on this incredible boat and do science, which like who gets to say that that's what we do? And so that was my first year, was bottom of the totem pole. Next year, I become the reef specialist and still the teaching fellow. So still, have a lot of hats to wear. That was also my first year as a medical officer on board. The next semester after that, I get to do my first winter program, which means that we are sailing in the cold, sailing in the tropics with tank tops and shorts and flip flops. Real nice. But this semester program, we were sailing out of Massachusetts in October into the middle of the Atlantic and then down to the Caribbean. So we leave port and I am wearing a winter hat, a long sleeve, a hoodie, a jacket, a vest, and a rain jacket, plus 2 pairs of pants and these boots. So off we go into the winter. And eventually, about 3 weeks into this 5.5-week sail, we make it to warmer weather and eventually make it to the Caribbean, which was nice. But that particular program was the first iteration of a gap year program. So we were taking students between high school and college. And it was the first time we had ever done it. And I was hired as the maritime history professor for that trip. So that meant that I got to work with the scientists and the captain and the other maritime history professor on designing this program from scratch, which was incredible. And then after that, we also I did a third version of that CCC program. So that Caribbean program that we just sailed all over the Caribbean for a third time. So I think these are 3 years of doing this. And that program ended right as COVID was hitting. So we went straight into quarantine after that. The Dominican Republic actually fully closed its borders for about 2.5 months. And so I had to go back to the DR. We didn't know what the situation was going to be with me being able to come into the US or not with everything that was changing. And so at the same time as all of this turmoil is happening, I also get accepted into Harvard, which I was supposed to do an in-person program for. but all of that is happening, and so I end up back in Dominican Republic. So this is my first time living back in Dominican Republic in 7 years. So I go back home, show up to my parents' house. Real exciting. Love my mom, love my dad. We do not necessarily need to live in the same house all the time. That's a little much. That's like type 2 fun. But, so I get to go to Harvard. I finished my, well, I'm doing my degree, still hoping that we will be able to go back in person in December. We don't go back in December, but in between that summer and that December, I'm kind of like, oh, well, I'm not gonna get a job right now because I am doing school, and in theory, I'm moving to Boston in December. In the meantime, my grandmother had some health issues, which I was really grateful that I wasn't in Boston, because I got to be with my mom and help with that. December comes around and we all know that that didn't go away. So now we're not in person still. And so I'm like, okay, well, I probably need a job. Probably be producing some money. So that takes us to the whales. So I end up working for the Ministry of the Environment of the Dominican Republic as a coordinator for the Vice Ministry of Marine and Coastal Resources. It's a really long job title. I was not designed to work in government offices. We learned that real quick. It was really cool that I got to work with marine biology specifically. I don't have a degree in marine biology, but I have 3 years of practical experience, which made me qualified to do this job. And so it was really cool to see like what actual marine biologists are doing, right? Because I was living in the la la land of marine biologists are sailing on sailboats, and it's so fun and cool. Really, marine biologists are working on computers most of the time. But one of the times that we weren't doing that, we got to, so National Geographic and the BBC, were doing a documentary for Disney Plus with, ¿cómo se llama el Titanic? What's the name of that Titanic guy?
James Cameron.
With James Cameron.
I like the name of the Titanic.
So they were doing this big documentary. They were filming humpback whales in Silverbank. Silverbank is a protected area in the Dominican Republic. It is actually the birthplace of most Atlantic humpback whales. So the humpbacks from up here, that you all probably see humpbacks in the coast of North Carolina as they're moving through. The ones that go all the way up to Massachusetts, all of those are born down in Dominican Republic. And so this documentary was focusing on looking at moms and calves. In order to do that, they had this big, incredible, massive research vessel, state of the art, so cool. Somebody from the ministry had to go on it. It was not me. Somebody else got sent on that one. I then got sent on a really janky looking, but real effective little catamaran ahead of the big research vessel. And so our job, we were actually out a week ahead of the other ones. And our job was to put GPS tags on these whales, because the documentarians not only wanted footage of whales, but they wanted to be able to follow the same set of whales. This is what those GPS tags look like. Humpback whale GPS tags are actually super specialized. They only send a signal when the whale is breathing. And so that means that it has to be up here, because that is the only point in the whale that comes out every single time they come out without breaching or jumping or doing any of the big things. So we're putting those tags on. These tags are actually about this big. They're metal. They're about this big. They don't hurt the whale. At this point, whales are mostly blubber up there. You shoot them with a crossbow. So the tag goes on a crossbow, which is pretty wild. Um, there are 10 people in the world who can do this. Out of those 10 people, there's one person who's a lady. She was the one who was on my boat, and I was like, yes, get it. So I got to spend a week with her following whales around Silver Bank. We sailed this catamaran, not the big fancy research vessel. We sailed the catamaran out into the middle of the Atlantic to this place called Silver Bank. We anchor there and we literally spend a week on a small boat following whales around and trying to label them. It was incredible. It was some of the coolest, like most close-up encounters we've had with whales. Because there's so many of them. We were also recording them. I should have put I can show you whale songs later if you would like to see them. The conditions to tag have to be perfect. Like there has to be exactly 2.5 clouds and the chop has to be 1/3 of a cent. Like it's super precise conditions, which means that there was a lot of time where we were also just kind of like sitting in a small boat in the middle of the ocean. But that then allowed for whales to come up to us. And so they did all the time. These are not zoomed in pictures. That's just like, that's how close the whale was to the boat, because they would just come. Whales are actually super curious. They're also super aware that we are there. Like they come and they peep, like we call it peeping, like they literally put their eye out of the water to see onto the boat. Like they're very aware of our existence around them. And so one of the people who I was there with, so it's a specialized person who can tag whales. Then there's also the guy who's driving us around Silverbank on the small boat, is one of 3 people in the world who have a permit to take tourists to Silverbank to swim with humpback whales. So somehow I end up with like all of the very exclusive people who would like to go to Silverbank, like ideal tourist group to go to Silverbank with. And so at one point, the conditions weren't ideal for tagging, but it was a pretty calm day. There wasn't a lot of swell or current or anything. And we're just sitting there because we can't tag, and these 2 whales start circling the boat, really friendly. They're just like curious about what we're doing. They're not being aggressive or playful with each other either. They're just like very calmly swimming with each other. And Jean, the whale swimming specialist, says these would be perfect whales to swim with. Would you like to swim with them? And I was like, yes. So I like immediately put on my wetsuit. I'm so excited and put on this wetsuit so quickly that I don't even take my camera the first time. I'm just like, oh my God, whales, 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 whales. I'm just swimming with whales. Second time around, I'm like, should probably bring my camera. So I have some more pictures. I also have some really cool video, but the PowerPoint doesn't always do great with video. But these I took this picture. So I'm underwater as these ginormous animals are just like swimming by. When we talk about their fin span, we often talk of it as a wingspan, and it really inside the water really does look like wings. They have such control of like how they're turning, and they're incredible creatures, and I cannot believe I got to swim with them. But yeah, I saw more whales in a week than most people will ever see ever. So that was incredible. And then we got, right, so now we can track these whales. So the people on the big boat are tracking the whales real time, trying to follow them around. We just wanted the cool maps. So these are actually all of our whales. Most of them lost their GPS. These GPS trackers fall off of them. And it's fine. We just want as much data as we can get. So we're not expecting that to track on them forever. So most of them fell out like right as they were heading out of kind of the Caribbean shelf. But one of them, we actually got to track all the way from Silverbank up to almost Canada, which was really cool. And so the big boat with the cameras and James Cameron on it, Got some awesome footage. I don't know exactly when this documentary is supposed to come out, but it's coming out, I think, this year. But this was one of the cool things I got to do at the ministry. Most of my work was not this fun. It was infuriating and slow and editing papers, and it was awful. And so very quickly thereafter, I was like, I remembered I'm supposed to be a teacher. So I very quickly went off back to being a teacher, which takes us to the next one. And I'm almost done. This is Hummingbird Adventures. So we remember this, fly back to when we're talking about hummingbirds. So I go back to a school. I'm now teaching science and history and literally 7 subjects in one school year, which is not how many subjects a teacher should teach ever, but that's what I was doing. I get an opportunity to move to a job in Colorado because of visa paperwork processing. My visa doesn't come through. And so I can't take that job, but I tell the school that I'm working for, I'm like, hey, so I think I'm gonna leave. I have this job over here. It's gonna be really fun. And the head of school is like, no, don't leave. Please don't leave. Please stay. We'll give you this outdoor education program that you've been talking about. And so they give me the opportunity to create this entire outdoor education program. Bear in mind, outdoor education does not exist in the Dominican Republic. So this is the first time anything like this is being brought out. I suggest I'm going to take your children for a whole week up to the mountains in the Dominican Republic. We're going to do a lot of learning and have a lot of fun. You can imagine the reaction of the parents when they're like, you're going to do what? Absolute what? So our first trip, this is my first group of chickens, first group of kids who went out with us. We had 12 kids the first time. By the end of the program, we had up to 20, the 6th graders was 24. We had up to 24 kids at a time, which was really cool. We got to work with this incredible place called Spirit Mountain, which is the only location that is specifically designed for outdoor education in the Dominican Republic. It was a couple of Americans who came to the DR, and they have this big organic coffee farm and blah, blah, and they have a school that they started there, and they were like, wow, we would really like to make a space for outdoor education, and I like somehow find them, and like then suddenly we're doing this, and it's incredible, and it's such a brilliant opportunity. But I do end up taking the kids out for a whole week. So students 6th through 12th grade would go and spend a week with us out in the mountains in DR. We did it individually. So there was a 6th grade group, 7th grade, so on and so forth. And we did every single thing they did in school. So we did math, science, history, Spanish, English, all of the things that they would do in school, we were doing out here in the mountains. Except for now we get to, right, we're talking about water systems on a textbook. No. We're gonna go see the water systems. And so it was like such an incredible opportunity to develop something that is completely new in the Dominican Republic, but that I felt so sure that I could do because of the years that I have spent doing all of these other things, right? And it's sometimes easy to think like, wow, I got so lucky doing this, right? But luck comes to those who are prepared and those who are ready when it comes, right? And so this was an opportunity that I had not foreseen, but because I had taken my job seriously, whether it was as a deckhand or as a head professor or head guide, I had always been looking at like, how do we do things and why do we do things and what are the protocols and how does this work and that work? And I have over 140 hours of wilderness medical training. I had been director of different programs all around. And so when this showed up, I was like, amazing. It's just putting it all together.
Were
Yeah.
you the only instructor out there?
So there were 3 of us at a time. So it was me, Miss Isa back here. And we usually had a doctor.
Was it optional class? For the students,
It was an optional trip for students.
and these were junior in high school.
And so I got to do this for about 2.5 years. We got to really test out a lot of this and see like exactly how the protocols were gonna work for each place. And each thing that we were doing, what we needed to get for the students, what we needed to get for us, how we could accommodate a ton of different necessities, whether that was diabetic students or vegetarian students or students with allergies and so on and so forth, and being able to develop all of that was really amazing. And to be able to make these spaces open and accessible to all of the students, regardless of whatever needs they had, was really a gift to us, that we were doing this from design, and that we could inclusivity was part of the design of the program versus an afterthought. And then, so did this for 2.5 years, and about a month ago, I handed over the handbook that I had so tirelessly worked on. Is a massive stack of papers that has every single procedure and protocol that you can imagine, in order for this program to work. And said goodbye to Hummingbird Adventures, because I am gonna start my own program. So this program, Hummingbird Adventures, was part of a school. So it was the American School of Santo Domingo. It was their outdoor education program. And so now I am actively right now stepping out into the world and starting a semester program called the Caribbean Outdoor Learning Institute. The Caribbean Outdoor Learning Institute, you might notice that the acronym, the acronym for it is COLI, which is COLI, and the word for hummingbird in Spanish is colibri. And so this is the first time anybody's seen this logo, so welcome. And so we are looking to launch our program this fall. We have started working on curriculum and design and all of that. It is going to be a bunch of different things, but mostly focusing on a semester program where we have students for a whole semester, right? So we are looking at a lot of different things, but right now probably going to be doing a gap year semester. So students get to go to the Dominican Republic and spend the whole semester learning about a bunch of different topics by exploring the whole island. So we're gonna kind of be moving around the entirety of the island and seeing all that it has to offer. And I am so excited. And so this is us. We do not yet have an Instagram. Once we have it, Yema's gonna put it all over the place. But that's my email. That's my personal Instagram. Which I will be posting on also about this if you wanna see what comes up. We also have included a GoFundMe link if you are interested in giving us funds. But yeah, coming soon. So thank you for listening. So if you have any questions, I don't even know what time it is. I feel like I've been talking for 7 minutes.
You did great.
Yeah, if you have any, I said a lot of things, but if you have any questions about anything.
Well, I was just curious, I mean, part of the institute, you find out. And since it's a semester, I assume it goes over many different courses. Were you doing more like social history or natural history or?
Yeah, so we follow,
Like you specifically, I guess, but also.
yeah, we follow the like average US curriculum. So whatever like most public schools are doing is what we are gonna do. So if 11th grade, I think it's US history, at least for most places in Colorado. Yeah. So we are doing US history. We actually even do AP programs. So if you're in AP US history, you can do AP US history. The entire semester is about 42 kids. So it's pretty small. Yes.
That's, I was gonna ask, what does it cost to participate in this program?
Oh, it is wild. They're very expensive for the semester programs are very expensive. We usually have, most of our students are coming in from private schools. But they also have, especially HMI, actually has a really strong scholarship program because they have a really strong alumni network. And people like how you measure donations from alumni. One of the things that you measure is like how soon after graduation people are donating. Because you often, people wait till they have money to be able to donate back. Students donate back to HMI within the year of graduating, even if it's like a couple of months. So they actually have a pretty strong scholarship.
That's HMI.
The High Mountain Institute, that place I worked at in Colorado.
I was curious, just for a better understanding, like. When the VR, why you said the Hummingbird program was the school system. Program, I was curious, I did fifth grade outdoor environmental education, and we met. We met 6 different times a year for a day. But they chose to do like a weekend. Was it because logistically, like proximity, or was it like the goal to get a really, like intensive, like,
Yeah,
forgot my word, but.
yeah. I'm a strong believer of consecutive time. So I think that it takes a while for anybody to get adjusted to these spaces. I take their phones away. They're writing by hand, which for most high schoolers are not writing by hand nowadays.
What'd you think?
They're writing by hand. They're sleeping, they're camping. A lot of them have never been camping. They're doing all of their own dishes. They're doing all of their own cooking. They're doing all of the cleaning of the campsite. And so it takes a while to like adjust and be comfortable in those spaces. And I want them to get to that point. And so in order to do that, ideally you do it with more time. My original proposal was 2 weeks. Actually, it didn't get approved. But originally my intention was like, it's 2 weeks. I think the longer we do it, the more, because the first week, by the end of the first week, kids are being like, oh, yeah, like they have a favorite spot in the campsite or whatever. And like, after that is when you truly get to like be fully.
It's an opt-in arrangement, and the other students who decide for whatever reason they actually are.
And so that's part of why our academics was so structured versus more, ideally, I would have done it more project-based, which is more of what Poli is gonna be like. Is more like big project and exploration based versus dividing things by subject. It was because our students needed to come back to the school and be at the same point. And one of the really cool things was, even though the two of us aren't specialists in math, we got all of our curriculum done. So the work that the kids did was given to us by the teachers of the kids. Because that meant that we were gonna be covering the same subjects, right? So that was really important, so that there was like a continuity in what they were doing. But it was incredible to see how often our kids would come back from the mountains either ahead of the other students, because they just had less distractions, and so we got to finish more work than the students in the city did. And how often they had like a deeper comprehension of what we were doing than other students. Partially, like, I remember one particular case of a history project where we took packets and they did all the reading for their packets, and then they did a physical poster of like what they learned and blah, 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 and then we had them build something and so on and so forth. Versus the students in the school had read the same amount of reading from the same packets, but it was from a website. And they had done like PowerPoints, and then they had a debate. So each side was actually learning a different thing, and then the two sides had a debate, the kids who had been with me in the mountains and the other students. And it was wild because my kids are saying the things off the top of their head because they had to memorize it because they wrote it 17 times on different things. And these students were also doing a great job and they had learned the information, right? But they were using more notes or relying more on their PowerPoints or so on and so forth. And it's just cool to see, like, it was cool to see immediate benefits, right? We know that there's long-term benefits that we will see over time. It was really interesting to see this.
Question from online, why was the outdoor program called Hummingbird Adventures?
Yeah, Hummingbird Adventures did come from hummingbirds. It was actually, I had done in college during my undergrad. I had done, somebody had said like dream up the perfect educational institution. It was part of one of our ed classes. And so when I did mine, the name was Hummingbird Adventures, obviously because I love hummingbirds. And so that stuck and that had always been like the dream was like the Hummingbird Adventures program. And so when it came with ASSD, I gave it to ASSD. So it comes from the hummingbirds. Okay.
Program, you're familiar, it's one semester.
Yeah,
But that's about like high school, college students or.
I'm thinking gap year.
Oh, that's fine.
Yeah, so in between and part of it is we did some prototype programming in hummingbirds during the summers. Ms. Claire helped us with some, last summer, we did an engineering, a week of outdoor education and engineering. And so what we did was it wasn't like one particular type of engineering, it was just like all, like, what is engineering? And it was like a college prep program. I think our students often leave to college without, like, they might know they want to do engineering because they're good at math and science. And so they're like, ooh, and engineers are cool. So you're like, ooh, engineer. But we don't really, Claire's an engineer on a tall ship. How many of you knew that tall ships had engineers when you were in high school? Right? And so being able to look at like, what does engineering actually look like? And so we spent a whole week in Punta Cana. We looked at civil engineering. We looked at the engineering, the spatial engineering of national parks, the spatial engineering of animal enclosures. We looked at chemical engineering through, there's a brewery in Punta Cana. And so we went to the brewery and learned about chemical engineering from them. We got to go to the energy plant in Punta Cana and see their like reuse of their like renewable and non-renewable resource energy production. And so it was just, we got to speak to, we had a robotics engineer from Seattle call in, David from Google. We had like all sorts of like just exposing the kids to like all of the different things that can be engineering, right? We didn't cover it all, but it was a lot of these students came out with like such a cool understanding of this. So kind of like the idea is to kind of take big topics like that and do an exploration of those topics using the Dominican landscape as the avenue to. Yeah.
I don't quite know how to ask this question, or if it's like I'm using like, but there's like idea, I was thinking about the High Mountain Institute, and I was curious if that was more like, this is an outdoor classroom, so we just have math outside, we have our history outside, you know what I mean? And but for the Caribbean Institute, you're looking at to create a project that's like the anchor to all the subjects, and it's kind of
Is
So-
the outside.
right. And is that more separate thing with something High Mountain was doing? I'm just thinking of like.
So HMI did a really cool job of mixing both of those things. I think outdoor education can often fall into that category of like, we're just doing math outside.
Right.
Versus the idea is to use the outside to do math. which might sound like a minor difference, but like it's actually really big. Because, if we're doing worksheets outside, like it's still gonna be nicer because you're outside, but like you're still doing worksheets. Versus if you're learning the Pythagorean theorem by measuring the heights of trees, it's gonna stick. It just does, because you're doing it physically and you're learning it, and you might fill in a worksheet at the end, but you're doing all of that physically first. HMI does a brilliant job of kind of mixing both of those things. So during our classroom time, we do a lot of like just what you would think of traditionally as a classroom. But when we're out in the field, we try to make things go with what we're doing. So for example, when we were talking about for US history, we do 20 days in the canyons in Utah in a area called Bears Ears National Monument. And when we were there, it was actually a public like news at the time. They were talking about like how these public lands would be used. And so ranchers had an opinion, and the government had an opinion, and oil had an opinion, and the people who lived there had an opinion, and the indigenous population there had an opinion, so on and so forth. And so we were talking about debates and land use and land expansion in the US in US history. That was just part of the curriculum. And so what we did was, instead of doing a debate on whatever the textbook said, we did it specifically on that land. And so it was like on the land usage of that area. And so when we're on expedition, we can do they do brilliant jobs of like intersecting those things. And then when we're in the classroom, we do kind of go back to more of the traditional stuff.
Like in some of the younger grades in the US, and this is a common problem, like some of them are self-contained classrooms for the teachers teaching all of the subjects, and some of them are already divided out. And a lot of teachers do work with the other folks in their grade to connect different pieces. They're not doing it outside. So it's to like all of it holistically and interconnecting things.
Yeah.
Like a lot of classroom teachers try really hard to do. But doing it outside, it's just like everything. And I wonder if like a challenge is like if you're trying to connect everything is like doing the history like the same time you're doing a science that they've caught up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
terrible at asking questions.
I think my brain works like that naturally. So I'm the kind of person who's like sitting in a bio class and thinking of like the history of the molecule. I'm cool.
No, like my master's degree was in history, but
Yeah.
I've done environmental, and I was in social
Exactly.
history and loved environmental history, and so
And I
it's
think
all together.
exactly, and I think the more like if you look at one of the things we did was if you put the thing in the middle and you learn all of the things around it, right? So if you put the environment in the center, that environment can teach you math, and it can teach you English, and it can teach you history, and it can teach you all of the things, right? And so if you are doing more of a kind of like skills-based learning of like, you need to learn how to debate. Doesn't really matter what the debate is about. You need to learn how to debate. We can then make a debate about something else. And so I know that standards and skills and all of that, like, it's very different when we're talking about public schools and what each state and county and so on and so forth adheres to. But there is definitely like some wiggle room in there. And that's kind of like how I conceptualize it, is like you center something, whatever you want, you're gonna put in the middle. And so how do we connect everything else to that? And that can even be helpful for students who are separated. If we're all learning about the wetlands and we're learning science and math and history and everything from the wetlands, then inherently that becomes the center, even though all of these things are coming out of it. Yeah. And it also brings each kid into that subject, right? So like if maybe there's a kid who's not sciencey, And you talk to them about the wetlands and they're like gone, right? This kid is paying no attention, but they're like huge English, right? They're big on English and they love reading and poetry and so on and so forth. And you find poems about swamps. And suddenly they're like, wow, the beauty of the swamp, or the really artsy student who now gets to like look at art of the swamp, or the mathematical kid who you're like, okay, but like it's really important to know exactly how much water comes in and out because like mangroves depend on these waters to be exactly the same. And so, or figure out how much rain has to fall in order for this to flood so that we can prepare the county for flooding before it even happens, and so on and so forth. That, right, I just did like 4 different lessons on, but I centered the swamp. And so that's kind of how I conceptualize it, I guess. Did that-
Want that, but it's just hard to make it happen around.
Yeah.
They do have one connect language art. But they do it outside for the members, so, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, we're gonna wrap it up. Thank you guys for attending online. If you want more information about the Southeastern Swamp Stewards, please check out their Facebook page, and you can find future events on ncwf.org.